Meantime, on to the issue of the day, a Roy Morgan poll out overnight. That really is a bit of a turning point, a tipping point in terms of public support. Really shows that so clearly ACT and National and ACT in the driving seat, a big drop for Labor, and Winston back at 5%. We had Bryce Edwards down as a guest this morning to talk about a column he's written about Winston, and so typical of Winston, his timing's perfect, as was ours in asking Bryce on. He joins us now. You had a look at this Roy Morgan, Bryce?
Yeah, look, it's kind of as expected. The rout of Labor just continues. National's finding its feet.
Yeah, I think really this poll is a public poll, though, is the first indication of how bad this could be. I mean, all the rest of them, people have been saying, when's something finally going to give? Well, something's given here, mid-20s, geez.
Yes, Labor's on 26, down nearly 5 points. And that's just been the direction of travel for some time for Labor. They've been heading down, but some of these scandals, some of these incompetencies in the government are finally adding up, I think, to seeing just so many voters abandoning.
And you can't scream rogue. You can't scream rogue poll here, can you, Bryce?
No, because, like I say, it's in the direction of travel anyhow. This is where things have been going, and the news has been bad for the government. Some people will question whether the Roy Morgan poll is as credible as some of the other polling outfits. And, I think there are some questions about Roy Morgan, but generally they get it right. They were, I think the closest at the last election. So, no, they're pretty good. So I wouldn't see this as a rogue poll at all.
And the Nat's up. Have you seen the leadership? Did they do leadership on the Roy Morgan?
I don't think they did.
No.
Although I will quickly point out that they have a really interesting poll question, the Roy Morgan poll, on whether people think New Zealand is going in the right direction. And once again, it's at record lows. They're saying that, there's 61% of New Zealanders, up nearly 7%, saying that New Zealand is headed in the wrong direction, and only 29% of people think it's heading in the right direction.
Okay,
so that is, again...
Yeah, that's a mood of the country. That's
a lot about the mood.
Super telling. All right, and I've said I think this is an election you're either voting for change or the same, and those figures suggest change. Look, just a couple of other things I want to get in. Winston is at 5%, and whether or not what the margin of error is, and your column was kind of reflective of this. Every time you think that guy's dead and had his last hurrah, I mean, the timing is impeccable.
Well, he meets the moment, I think, at the moment. Winston Peters, he's saying all the right things to direct himself at grumpy voters who think this government's off the rails but aren't convinced by Christopher Luxon, and he's going much harder than Christopher Luxon or even David Seymour, especially on things like race relations, law and order.
And the vax, he's basically, though he won't admit it to me, last interview we had, he's gone for the anti-vax nutter vote, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think he's doing it very carefully. He's not sort of putting his cards all on the table saying he's an anti-vaxxer now.
Yeah, but he said he's going to have a full inquiry with no politicians involved, and there'll be compensation for people who are mandated out of their jobs. There's nothing subtle about that.
So there's a few percent there, I think, that he will sort of hoover up, if you like. And I think that puts him very squarely above 5%. So I think the problem is, at the moment, most of the media are kind of not very objective. And, most of them are sort of lefties.
Hang on, let's just go back, Bryce. Most of the media are kind of not very objective. Can I paraphrase that for you? Mainstream media are bent left.
Well, what I'm saying is that political journalists especially have just become too subjective in that they are thinking about what they want. They're not able to distance themselves from what they are reporting on. And most of them hate New Zealand First, right? And so most of them really sneer at New Zealand First, so they don't take them seriously as
New Zealand First as an
the picture.
organisation, by its representation, by its front people, is as far away from the snowflake millennials who occupy the Parliamentary Press Gallery. They're worlds apart.
The media in general, in fact, the media vote mostly Green and Labour, and some of them might vote National, but there'll be very few journalists that will vote New Zealand First, and therefore the reporting of New Zealand First, I think, is very unfair.
So he gets to 5% in a hostile environment.
Yeah, and perhaps in some ways that might work for him in the end, that he's able to position himself as, the underdog, the
outsider
person that doesn't get reported, the outsider, and that always works for the likes of, or any populists really, people that are anti-establishment, and that's really the vote he's going for at the moment. He's pushing that he isn't he's not one of the insiders, even though he's been the leader of this party for 30 years, he's been in Parliament longer than anyone. But no, I think his voice will resonate quite strongly this election.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not going to get, he's still only going to be a minor party. But, at the moment, the media are writing New Zealand First off, and that's just crazy.
Do we end up perhaps in a situation, Bryce, where Winston does hold the balance of power?
Well, it's not going to be the balance of power, because he's very clearly said he's not going to support a Labour government. And he's never done that before, which is quite interesting. He's always played that kingmaker role. I won't tell you what I'm going to do before the election. This time he has said. And I think his line more is about keeping the bastards honest. He knows...
Whoever the bastards are.
No, well, he says the bastards are going to be national, and I'm going to be the handbrake on their excesses. I'm going to stop ACT from pushing this government off into a kind of economically, far-right direction. I'm going to be the voice of common sense on this national government. And that will appeal to a lot of people on both the right and the left. I mean, there'll be a lot of people that on the left that think, well, this government's lost, but I don't really want a government dominated by David Seymour on the right of National. So, maybe I will vote for New Zealand First just to moderate National.
Look, I was interested in the top result too. At 4%, they're there or thereabouts. I think the best we did in 2017 when I was involved, we got to 3.7%. Is that perhaps disenchanted Labour voters just looking for an alternative?
Yeah. I think that even more so. This election is all about the minor parties, really. Labour's tanking. National's still struggling to, put forward they're going to build you a road,
Bryce. Don't worry, there's a tunnel coming.
Look, there's not a lot of vision there, is there? And so people are, looking around for, well, how else is there? And top, I think it's sad that they're not in Parliament at the moment. They have so much to offer. I'm not a top voter. I'm not suggesting anyone should vote top, but I'm just saying New Zealand's party system benefits from having small players like top. They bring some other perspectives, some dynamism that is quite different from the laziness of the major parties. So, I think it'd be good for democracy if top do get above 5%.
Yeah. ACT and the Greens, is ACT topped out? Is that as good as it's going to get for them? It's still bloody good for them.
It's pretty good. This latest poll puts them on 14%. I tend to think they will keep going up, but who knows? They seem to be like New Zealand First, sort of speaking to the zeitgeist at the moment, and picking up a lot of those people on the right who just are unimpressed with Christopher Luxon and want politics to be a bit more than the bland, mushy middle. Yeah.
And the Greens, just there at 9%. Over 5%, so they don't need to worry too much.
Look, it's not bad, 9%, but historically the Greens have always done amazingly well when Labour's low, and they pick up all the disenchanted lefties, but they're not managing to do that at all. And some polls have had them on 7%. So something's going wrong with the Greens, and my own feelings are that they've become too much about the social engineering, what you might call woke politics. They're not really even connecting with the environmental voters. Yeah. And so, they're not really seen as a serious force at this stage.
Yeah. Look, I asked, and one of my callers before you asked, is this as low as Labor can go? Because it's pretty low.
I mean, what, National got just under 21% in the 2002 election, so I'd say that's the big
There
rock.
is still more downside. That
you could go further.
Yeah.
Look, let's not get too carried away. 26% for Labor today on the Roy Morgan. Roy Morgan do tend to have Labor lower than other polls.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure why. So, but to have Labor with a 2 on the start of the number will just be...
And it creates all sorts of problems in caucus, doesn't it? It creates all sorts of tensions when you've... Now, they get 33 MPs on this, right?
Yeah, and they've got, 65 at the moment.
65 at the moment, so that's a lot of people looking for work. Where does it mean you've got to be on the list that came out yesterday to be safe or have a safe seat?
Well, it's all complicated, isn't it? Because so many of those people on the list have safe seats.
Yeah.
So once you take out the safe seats, you really need to be in the top 10 on today's Roy Morgan poll, if it's going to be as bad as that to get in. Yeah. And, you've got... you've got a lot of the current list MPs that are outside that top 10, so there's going to be some nervous people there.
Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I had always been under the impression... Bryce, that some sort of, peace agreement, accommodation had been made when Chris Hipkins took over the leadership, that certain factions inside the caucus were just going to calm the farm a little bit in the recognition that they wanted to get back into government. They had to give Hipkins some ability to rebrand or reposition the party. I don't know if that was formally true, but that was the impression I got, particularly from the Maori caucus. Does that mean does this poll mean all that's off the table now? They're basically just fighting over the scraps?
I mean, when parties, in the doldrums and going backwards, they start to lose their unity, their loyalties, they infight. We're already seeing some leaking from the caucus.
Yeah.
And I think you're right, any deals that are formal or informal start breaking down, and you lose confidence and you get paranoid, and that's what we saw in 2020 with the Nats. When things were going backwards, it just sort of fuels more infighting and everything starts going wrong. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see more things going wrong in Labor. When you're going up, everything's going well. You hold it together. You're best friends with your colleagues. When it's like this, it's the other way. Yes.
Yeah. Bryce, the other thing is people should realise, shouldn't they, that the political parties themselves are generally a week or two ahead of us in polling like this because they're doing overnight stuff themselves and spending quite a lot of money keeping ahead of the curve on public opinion. So this result won't come today as a shock to anyone in Labor or National or anyone else.
That's right. But even so, I think just to have it all public and to have the people you meet on the streets when you're an MP, the people out at the journalists.
And it creates a mood, doesn't it, Bryce? Everyone likes backing the winning horse.
Oh, look, this is the real problem with polls. Or maybe it's a good thing, I don't know. But it's, yes, they create their own momentum, and we have what political scientists talk about as the bandwagon effect. So people like to, say, back a winner. And people do look at the polls, especially if they're undecided or if they're swing voters, and they look for other people to make their evaluations of political parties and the government. And so there'll be a lot of undecided voters that will see this and think, oh, my fellow citizens are against Labor. Well, I'll go against Labor too. So it has a self-fulfilling sort of potential, which is a real worry, I think, for the government.
Yeah. I'm not going to call an election this far out, but I'm going to say there's some pretty clear writing starting to appear on the walls. Bryce, as always, absolutely good talking to you. And I suppose it's a light-hearted question. God, and I look back at how long I've known or reported on him. Going to be good to have Winston Peters back in Parliament.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's good to have as many parties as possible. The minor parties bring a lot that the major parties are just so boring with. So, yep, especially good for political commentators.
Yeah, that's true. And cartoon writers, if there are any decent ones left. Bryce, really good talking to you. Thank you for your time. That is Bryce Edwards, head political lecturer at Victoria University, also head of the Democracy Project. Good commentator. And there we go. We picked apart the poll. Oh, James, you said you're bent. James, give me a ring. Tell me how I'm bent. Yeah, Winston's going for all the popular stuff. Someone says Winston is also committed to getting Marsden Point up and running again to restore our energy independence. I hope that is possible. Might get our quality bitumen back. Oh, the bitumen thing's an urban bloody myth as far as I can establish. Wow, big day. I just think that poll is big news, big political news.